Hi everyone, I think I'm about to be live. I am with you once again, and apologies as usual for the choppy video quality. I will be fixing that within the next few days. The article I'm about to read you is called Snowden Files Provide New Insight on the NSA and the Power It Wields. This was a relatively recent article that I wrote as a result of the amazing work that Susie Dawson began with the Decipher You initiative, and that I've continued to collaborate with her on, and it's been an amazing experience working with her. So without further ado, I will read you that material. And as I've said before on some of my quasi-older articles, this was published on December 29th, 2017, and today's date is January 25th, 2018. So, for anyone that gets confused, if the article says something like, if the article says something like, as recently as yesterday, then it's in reference to December, not the current day that I'm reading this to you. Okay, now, into the article. It reads, New Zealand Internet Party leader Susie Dawson and this author have continued to analyse Snowden files that have so far never received public scrutiny. Disobedient media previously reported on findings stemming from Batch 3 of the Intercept Snowden file archives. Dawson and this author have analysed over 100 documents from the Intercept's Batch 4 of the Snowden files to date, and have noted numerous items of key significance revealed in the never-before-publicised data. The collaboration under the title Decipher You will continue until some point in early 2018. A selected group of our findings is presented here, with the rest of Batch 4 findings to be discussed at a later date. And as a side note, I apologize to anyone who is watching this stream live who already watches Decipher You, because I know that you've heard me read this before in one of our streams. So apologies to you all, but I still wanted to make this article available to everyone else. So continuing on. Back to the article. One of the first documents in Batch 4 discussed the NSA's definition of denial and deception. The document advertises a seminar which would be presented by Dr. Larry Gershwin, the National Intelligence Officer for Intelligence Assurance and Chairman of the Foreign Denial and Deception Committee, FDDC. The description of Gershwin's presentation read in part, and they labeled denial, the definition of denial, secret, but the definition of deception was unclassified. So the definition of denial, and in the article it's a screenshot of the document, reads, denial are methods and means of protecting state and military secrets and of preventing or impairing U.S. intelligence collection and analysis that targets those secrets. Meanwhile, deception was measures designed to mislead by manipulation, distortion, or falsification of evidence to induce the U.S. to react in a manner prejudicial to its interests. And then back to the article as opposed to quoting from the document. Dawson noted that while the definition of denial was marked secret, the description of deception was marked unclassified. Another finding of interest from episode 10 of Decipher You was in regards to the definition of the Office of Target Pursuit. The Snowden file read in part, after completing a 6-month tour in TOPI, the Office of Target Pursuit, oh wait, no, sorry, that's wrong. Interns chose 2 additional tours from the S2 target offices, the Target Analysis Center, Cryptologic and Exploitation Services, including the Office of Target Pursuit and Network Analysis Center. With the help of a viewer, we were able to find definitions in regard to the initial file in a WikiLeaks document. So what that's saying is that as Susie and I were streaming, a really helpful viewer in our live stream helped us by cross-referencing the topic that we were confused about in WikiLeaks, and we found a document that was relevant. And it says that Prism has roots in the 80s, and that it's an heir in one sense of a history of intelligence alliances with as many as 100 trusted U.S. companies since the 1970s. The NSA calls these special source operations, and Prism falls under that rubric. And the document states that the special source operations oversee the Prism program, which is one of the most infamous examples of mass surveillance revealed by the publication of the Snowden files. The Washington Post and other outlets have reported extensively on Prism. The Verge describes the program. Prism is a tool used by the U.S. National Security Agency to collect private electronic data belonging to users of major internet services like Gmail, Facebook, Outlook, and others. It's the latest evolution of the US government's post-9/11 electronic surveillance efforts, which began under President Bush with the Patriot Act and expanded to include the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, FISA, of course, which was enacted in 2006 and 2007. While Prism is a relatively recent development, special source operations are decades older. The PDF goes on to say, like market researchers, but with far more privileged access, collection managers in the NSA's Special Source Operations Group, which oversees the Prism program, are drawn to the wealth of information about their subjects in online accounts. For much of the same reasons, civil libertarians and some ordinary users may be troubled by the menu available to analysts who hold the required clearances to task the Prism system. There has been continued exponential growth in tasking to Facebook and Skype, according to the Prism slides. With a few clicks and an affirmation that the subject is believed to be engaged in terrorism, espionage, or nuclear proliferation, an analyst obtains full access to Facebook's extensive search and surveillance capabilities against a variety of online social networking services. Another document revealed that the U.S. does indeed intervene militarily in order to secure the flow of oil to the U.S. and its allies. The admission was made in a file relating to a seminar on African petropolitics. The document reads in part, quote, by 2015, the United States will depend on West African oil for 25% of its oil imports. Oil production in Sudan has been a factor in the Sudanese civil war, with oil wealth sharing being a primary negotiating issue in the peace process. Oil has played a role in the extent of corruption and in sustaining military might in several African countries. Finally, threats to and security of the oil-producing areas in West Africa will be discussed, including U.S. engagement to improve security. This afterthought in the description of a petropolitics seminar is particularly relevant in light of the recent deaths of U.S. service members in African countries. News of their deaths struck a chord of dismay in much of the American public, who were caught off guard at the news that the U.S. was active in African nations. Reuters noted in October 2017 that U.S. deaths in Niger highlighted, quote, military mission creep in the continent, writing that the deaths shone a light on Washington's increasingly aggressive, special forces-led counterterrorism strategy in Africa and its risk of casualties. The Washington Post described the incident as indicative of a shadow war. The influence of oil and concerns surrounding the security of the flow of oil and the decision-making process behind such missions are often left out of such reports, but are nakedly and outright stated in the NSA documents. The concept of war for oil is not new, with legacy press outlets, including CNN, readily reporting the admission that military leaders that the Iraq War was based on securing oil interests. The NSA's admission that conflicts are entered into in order to benefit oil flow, in plain words, adds corroboration to such admissions, which were at one time dismissed as speculation. Another significant document covered in this author's collaboration in the Decipher You stream was that the NSA routinely outsourced network security and that the NSA showed very little concern for defensive security measures to protect their data. Concern for catastrophic security breaches is not shown in the hundreds of documents Dawson has analyzed thus far, dating up to late 2004. Dawson discussed the way in which improper data breaches by foreign states, terrorist organizations, or other entities should have been a major concern of the NSA. This notable lack of concern with security and potential security breaches was especially ominous, Dawson explained, given the increased number of people who were given access to sensitive material thanks to the NSA's use of corporate outsourcing. She said, quote, transferring data across corporate networks as they expand the pool of who can receive data, all of that has security implications. So they are opening more and more of breach points and proprietary networks, and it's impossible to secure if they are using corporate parties and having to go through their support channels. It's insane. Dawson stated that the NSA might have assumed that their systems were essentially bulletproof. She added, if Hewlett-Packard types are responsible for network security, God help the NSA. Dawson added that the that even the denial and deception documents did not address network-wide compromises, leaks, or breaches from another state. However, some documents illustrate preparation for disaster recovery in case of real-world disasters like hurricanes, tornadoes, and the like. It should be noted that disaster recovery is totally separate to network security, and that the presence of one variety of preparedness only serves to highlight the utter lack of regard for the other. The only reference to such concern was mentioned in the discussion of the fact that if a breach occurred, Congress was to be notified. While the NSA appears to have largely ignored network security, multiple documents Dawson analyzed described offensive hacking tactics. In light of the numerous breaches in security that have taken place over the years since these documents were penned, one hopes that a concern for data security has manifested since 2004. Dawson remarked that many of the NSA documents emphasized, quote, executive accessibility, while simultaneously executives were shown to employ an amnesiac approach to their role. She used the example of Snowden's attempt to raise constitutional issues resulting from mass surveillance as an example of the type of dangerous self-policing groupthink that can occur in environments that extol the virtues of executive accessibility, but also punish those who bring up serious questions. Dawson said, the function of corporatism is to create a veneer of executive accessibility, but to discourage employees from asking hard questions. An additional Snowden file titled Interview with Jim Cusick, SID Assistant Deputy Director for Data Acquisition, provided insight into the mindset of the leaders operating within the NSA in concert with figures like Michael Hayden. Cusick states in the interview, quote, I let it be known to NSA leadership that I was willing to take on virtually any task as long as it was in the middle of the fray, it was challenging, and it made a difference. Being a senior operations officer in NSOC has to rank as the best job in SIGINT by orders of magnitude. Heading up unconventional operations and managing NSA's largest budget category was the hardest and most demanding job I ever took on. Representing Lieutenant General Hayden at the Pentagon during the aftermath of 9/11 and Operation Iraqi Freedom was fascinating and added a whole new perspective on support to the warfighter and national tactical integration. And that's the end of the quote from Cusick. But when I researched that topic, I found that additional documentation regarding Cusick's role at the NSA reveals that James M. Cusick, Assistant Deputy Director of the NSA for Data Acquisition, he is Mr. Data Acquisition. He's the specialist in charge of building collection systems that can acquire vast amounts of data, and his unit is the one that is running this program. He is running data acquisition. That is huge. To the best of my knowledge, in the 5 years in which the program has been running, it has not caught a single person. So that's ridiculous that this type of data acquisition program has not caught a single terrorist is shocking. That Cusick described his values in NSA documents as willing to, quote, participate in virtually anything so long as the task was in the middle of the fray, it was challenging, and it made a difference, is concerning given his participation in the illegal mass surveillance of American citizens that has reportedly not delivered enough actionable intelligence to deliver a single person, suggesting that mass surveillance is not intended to address terrorism and national security, so much as it is to monitor and effectively control the public. Snowden's take on the illegality of mass surveillance practice, and then I quoted one of his tweets that said, mass surveillance was never classified to save lives. It was classified because the government knew if a real court ruled on it, they would declare it unconstitutional. Since 2013, they have, again and again. And he cited a Reuters article on German courts ruling against foreign intelligence mass communication surveillance. And then adding to that, former NSA Technical Director William Binney has been a longtime critic of the NSA's mass surveillance activities. His criticism of the practice is especially important because he helped create the program, but was horrified to later learn that the system he developed was used against American citizens in a vast domestic spying program. Binney's resignation in protest of mass surveillance, domestic mass surveillance, came years before the publication of the Snowden files. The issue of domestic surveillance, as described in the Snowden documents, has been thoroughly publicized by various outlets. However, the ready willingness of individuals like James Cusick, a major figure in the NSA's data acquisition program, to betray legal and ethical principles as openly stated in unreported Snowden documents creates a sharp contrast with the moral and constitutional stance shown by figures like William Binney. Susie commented at one point during our discussion that a little discussed factor in the current neo-McCarthyist obsession with Russia may stem from the fact that the country took in Edward Snowden despite the US and Western nations' desire to apprehend him. Dawson said, "If you're on the shit list of the US empire, the Western mafia, Russia is one of the few countries you can go to and still live and work. So part of all this is a huge vendetta against Russia for providing safe refuge for whistleblowers." Dawson has often spoken of the double standard employed against dissidents who speak out against the wrongs of Western nations and allies in comparison with the large outpouring of Western NGOs and humanitarian groups in response to activities and whistleblowers from states opposed by the West and their allies, including Iran and Russia. A further issue that Dawson and this author noted during the analysis of multiple unreported Snowden documents was the collaborative interaction between various intelligence agencies. This is significant because it works against the commonly held perception of Snowden as publishing NSA data due to animosity between the agencies. Dawson noted that the content of the Snowden files did not support such an interpretation. Instead, it revealed a revolving door between the agencies and the large extent to which the various agencies were interdependent, providing necessary services for each other. This is significant because it goes against the framing of Snowden's release of the NSA documents as the culmination of a rivalry between the CIA and NSA. The agencies are so intertwined that they deploy employees and establish offices within other agencies to handle specific issues relating to their specialization. Much of the content revealed in the Snowden documents reveals information that would harm the overall interests of the CIA much more than the agency would benefit from the wounded reputation of the NSA. Overall, Dawson and this author concluded in our analysis of the documents that it is highly unlikely that the CIA had any part in the Snowden's decision to leak NSA information. Sorry, my mouth is really dry and I don't have water, so I'm stumbling over words more than usual. The CIA is a principal customer of the NSA. One of the numerous documents that discuss the interdependence between NSA and CIA was the file from Batch 4 titled CIA Directorates Understanding More About Them. The document describes the collaboration between the CIA's Directorate of Intelligence, DI, and the NSA's Signals Intelligence, SIGINT. Although there is certainly collaboration between I'm now quoting from the document, quote, although there is certainly collaboration between the CIA and DI's analytic community and the NSA's SIGINT analysts, the CIA's DI is mostly a SIGINT customer, using finished NSA or SID product as one of their most valuable open sources in producing all-source intelligence products. That the CIA is an important customer of the NSA further suggests that the CIA would be unlikely to damage the NSA through the release of the documents like those leaked by Edward Snowden, and adds to the conclusion that Snowden is indeed an unbiased whistleblower. And the same document goes on to describe the interdependence of the CIA and NSA regarding the CIA's Directorate of Operations and the NSA's Signal Intelligence Directorate. There are many examples of DO and SID partnerships with HUMINT and SIGINT enabling each other. The file goes on to describe various directorates of the NSA, the CIA, and their customer-supplier relationship, as well as their interdependence and joint efforts. Quote, some joint CIA-NSA efforts, which actually include people from cross-CIA directorates and SID organizations, offer the best examples of how these two agencies can work well together. The Special Collections Service, SCS, is a joint NSA-CIA organization whose mission is the covert collection of SIGINT from official U.S. establishments abroad. The clandestine SIGINT program, ClanSig, run by the Jointly Staffed Technology Management Office, TMO, at CIA, provides numerous excellent examples of HUMINT enabling SIGINT and vice versa. Susie Dawson compared the relationship between the agencies described here to the left hand and the right hand of the same body. Further documents illustrated the revolving door between the NSA and CIA as well as the corporate sector. A file titled Perspectives from a Summer Intern stated, quote, "He worked at a wide variety of stops in the public sector, including a tour as the deputy director of the CIA, and later served in executive positions for private sector companies." So, backing up in case anyone's eyes were glazing over at this point, the documents there that I just quoted about the summer intern show that the NSA and CIA employees cross over. The same people, as Susie's pointed out many, many times, the same people are revolving through these different agencies, and so that really sheds a light on the disinfo people push about Snowden being somehow working for the CIA. And the document that I just quoted also shows, as I said, the enmeshing between the corporate sector and these agencies as well. And back to the article. When the Huffington Post spoke with William Binney, he stated his belief that the NSA's dragnet surveillance practices were used by the FBI for the purpose of protecting big banking interests. This statement is particularly relevant in the discussion of the NSA document that shows meddling in foreign banking institutions. Although The Intercept has reported on this particular file, the outlet's coverage of the information amounted to one paragraph and failed to discuss key questions raised by the agency's self-professed interference in foreign banks. The document in question, titled Crash Team, states, quote, "One key to the Crash Team's success has been its access to North Korean financial transaction data routed through foreign banks, a lucrative source of intelligence production and SIGINT development, SIGDEV efforts." The document continues, "In order to curtail North Korea's banking presence in Europe, targeted financial institutions as collection targets in their own right." Sorry, let me say that sentence again. The document continues, quote, "In order to curtail North Korea's banking presence in Europe," and then I skipped a bit in the sentence, then the rest of the quote reads, "targeted financial institutions as collection targets in their own right." So this revealed several instances of their complicity in North Korea's efforts to avoid scrutiny of its activities. So if you're reading the article, that sentence makes sense, because what I had done is I had taken two quotes from the same paragraph and I had cut a sentence out, but reading it out loud makes no sense. So if you want to go to the article that I've linked in the description, you can read it and it will be very clear. Moving on, that Signal's intelligence would directly target European banking institutions is a revelation that deserves coverage in its own right, and proved a major topic of discussion during Decipher analysis with Susie Dawson, who said, quote, "This shows that even big banksters can be targeted if it's politically expedient for them to be. As Dawson and I discussed, the Crash Team file raises serious questions about NSA's power over banks and financial institutions, both domestically and internationally." Dawson described the significant questions raised by the revelation that the NSA had interfered with foreign banks. Quote from Susie, "The NSA spying on the commercial sector is probably much more rampant than we typically hear about. The next question is what they are doing with that information. The power of that information is unbelievable, and they are collecting the strategic planning documents of those entities, knowing what they are going to do ahead of time. Their capacity to act on that ahead of time is phenomenal. It is the power not just to respond punitively to what has happened or is happening, but to respond to what will happen after the future, alter that future, and prevent it from happening. An additional document discussed during Decipher's live streams listed a number of entities and institutions who are customers of the NSA's intelligence products. The file titled, quote, "The Washington Liaison Office, who are those guys?" lists the Federal Reserve banking system as a customer of the NSA among other entities. And in the article I have a screenshot of that particular document, and I will read the list to you. And it's only a partial list of their customers, but it's important. It's important to even just to take note of these partial lists. Okay, so the list of customers includes the Department of Agriculture, the Department of Health and Human Services, the Department of the Interior, the Department of Transportation, the Environmental Protection Agency, the Export-Import Bank, Federal Aviation Commission, the Federal Communications Commission, and the Federal Reserve System, as well as the National Aeronautics and Space Administration. The document also states, quote, "The Washington Liaison Office customers usually have competing priorities totally unknown to each other, requiring a delicate balancing act in providing the timely SIGINT to all. For example, What the Secretary of Agriculture needs for her afternoon meeting with the EU representatives is completely different from what the NASA administrator needs prior to his visit to India. Again, serious questions arise from the fact that the Federal Reserve Bank is not a government entity, yet is able to buy intelligence services from the NSA. This raises obvious objections as to what varieties of services the Federal Reserve Bank buys from the NSA and for what purpose this intelligence is used. The document's description of its customers' competing priorities implies an incredibly delicate and potentially disastrous amount of power held by the NSA. From the agency's track record in terms of both legality and ethics, this document raises serious concern. And I'm noticing some errors that I wish I had fixed in the editing process, and I'm also remembering that this article was written on a time crunch, so apologies about that. Next time I publish on these files, I will take a lot more time in editing than I was able to here. An additional file titled Conference on GSM Collection in Iraq, which has not been previously discussed by media outlets, indicated that as far back as 2004, simply being in a targeted geographical location was enough to cause the NSA to surveil handsets. The file iterates that, quote, a profile was created to include only calls that were made near 27 known heroin processing labs in the country. When run against the available metadata, the program produced a list of handsets that were used in the targeted area. The top 20 handsets were then tasked for collection, and at least one has produced reportable intelligence. This is significant because it shows that of 20 surveilled handsets, the vast majority produced no actionable data. Dawson noted that the issues of collecting data on random people physically present at domestically targeted events, including protests, could be comparable to the geographically determined spying shown in the document. Dawson discussed in several examples, including people who were not protesting for, like, as using a protest as the example. Dawson described how people who were not protesting, but who happened to be in the physical vicinity of the protest, like shopkeepers or passers-by, or people simply driving through the area, would be targeted in such an instance, illustrating the pervasiveness of intrusive mass surveillance. The NSA file titled Big Changes at the U.S. Mission to the United Nations UN proved exceptionally noteworthy. It provided key insights into the NSA's role at the UN and the agency's self-concept regarding its influence in the lead-up to the Iraq War. The file also illustrated the influence of the United States in crafting narratives that would drive decision-making at the UN. While Dawson and this author read the document, we were prompted to research a number of secondary sources, including George W. Bush's speech to the UN in 2002. The NSA admits the agency participated in crafting Bush's speech for the purpose of garnering support for the war in Iraq, as well as using as many UN resources as possible for the conflict. This was a huge, huge document. In light of the weapons of mass destruction argument Bush employed during the UN speech, crafted in part by the NSA, Dawson raised the issue of the suspicious death of weapons inspector Dr. David Kelly. The BBC reported on Kelly's death, stating that he had been outed as a possible source of a report that cast doubt on the government's claim that Iraq had weapons of mass destruction capable of being deployed within 45 minutes. The BBC wrote that, soon after the controversy erupted, Kelly was found dead in a woodland a few miles from his Oxfordshire home after apparently taking his own life. Sorry, I was quoting there, and it wasn't the phrasing that I would have used. The US and the NSA described the desire to use UN infrastructure for the US agenda. The document brags about the NSA's success in crafting a global narrative regarding the war in Iraq and the UN's support of that conflict. The document also describes, quote, our very own NSA representatives to US UN had announced not only August 2004 end of a 3-year assignment, but also his retirement from federal service in early September. That the NSA had a representative of the agency which interfaced directly with the US UN is troubling. So the point there wasn't that so-and-so worked from 2004 to 2005 or whatever time period, but that the point there was that he was assigned to the UN. And that was very significant. Dawson described the report as the NSA's implicit admission that it controls the UN. She also noted that the weapons of mass destruction argument for the war, according to the NSA's own document, originated with SIGINT intelligence produced by the NSA. Effectively, the NSA is taking credit in the file for the WMD narrative that helped initiate US involvement in one of the longest, most devastating, and costliest wars in history. By 2013, Reuters reported that the war in Iraq had cost over $2 trillion. The Huffington Post reported that over 500,000 Iraqi civilians had died during the conflict to date, and I'm sure that the number is much, much higher than that. The NSA would claim responsibility for a narrative that led to one of the most expensive and harmful conflicts in recent memory, makes it truly one of the most destructive forces the planet has ever seen. Dawson commented that the NSA's admission suggests that the agency had taken part in constructing narratives and aiding the creation of UN resolutions for decades. The NSA document reads, quote, and I have this portion in the article, it's in block quote because it's really important, and it reads, as the US mounted a strategic response to these attacks and worked with the UN to garner world support for the global war on terrorism, SIGINT proved vital in the US negotiations that resulted in 2 key and unanimously approved Security Council resolutions on Iraq. SIGINT also contributed to the composition of the US President's speech at the UN General Assembly in September of 2002 and to Secretary Powell's presentation to the Security Council on the case against the Iraq dictator, among other events. SIGINT also helped US UN and state officials in their decisions regarding Afghanistan, countless peacekeeping operations around the world, Africa, Sudan, and so many other situations. And that's the end of that quote. The document is critical in that it shows the NSA outright stating that its signals intelligence influenced US negotiations that resulted in 2 key unanimously approved Security Council resolutions on Iraq. Essentially, the NSA is taking responsibility for helping plunge the world into one of the most damaging ongoing conflicts in the modern era. And then I included a picture of Colin Powell holding the model vial of anthrax while giving a presentation to the UN in 2003. The file emphasizes this point itself when it states SIGINT was also contributed to the composition of the US President's speech in 2002 and to Secretary Powell's presentation to the Security Council on the case against the Iraq dictator, among other events. This passage indicates that the NSA signals intelligence contributed to the now infamous presentation to the UN given by former Secretary of State Colin Powell, who called that speech, in hindsight, a great intelligence failure, according to PBS. Crucially, the document also states that the NSA signals intelligence, quote, helped US UN and state officials in their decisions regarding Afghanistan and countless peacekeeping operations around the world, etc. This statement indicates that the NSA was not only responsible for providing faulty intelligence that led to the Iraq War, but that it had also contributed directly to foreign policy decisions made by the United Nations and the United States in regards to Afghanistan and countless peacekeeping operations around the world, Africa, and etc. The statement amounts to an admission that the NSA has been a driving force in the American foreign policy and the United Nations decision-making process for years, if not decades. This is an important story, and Disobedient Media will continue to provide coverage regarding the results of Decipher You collaborative analysis as it unfolds. And thank you, everyone that sat with me for this long. It's a very, very long article, and I really appreciate it, especially the people that are already frequenting Susie and my streams on Decipher You. And if you don't listen to those streams, you might want to join us because they're really, really informative and awesome. And so I will leave this stream here for now. Thank you. I see Fly and Jenny Lynn and some of the regulars in chat. Yeah, it's a long, I see some people talking about the length of this video, so I apologize for that. I will end this stream now, and I will return in a few minutes after I've had a drink of water to stream one more article before I sleep. Thank you.